Hey, California families, I wanted to come to you with an urgent update about a piece of legislation that is currently moving through the California Legislature. I know that probably makes you real excited about what I'm about to bring you, but it's important. Obviously, there are so many different bills that go through the legislature, and I can't focus on every single one, but this one is really bad. And I'm going to follow it up with a second one at the end of this podcast, and I'm just going to feature that additional one so you know of two really bad bills that are going through that if you are a homeschooling family, that especially if you are connected to a charter program in California, this is going to affect you if this bill passes. So I am talking about Assembly Bill 84, and I'm going to run through everything so you can just put in your little headphones and do the dishes, fold your laundry while I explain everything to you. Here we go. Okay, so there is a new bill. It's Assembly Bill 84. This guy's name, you guys, he's Assembly Member Al Muratsuchi. I tried looking up his name and it comes up so many different ways. So it is spelled Muratsuchi. He introduced this piece of legislation from the Assembly into the California Legislature, and it is being called a charter school killer. So that's going to give you the framework of what we are working with here. Now, as you guys know, I am a homeschooling family. We have been since the beginning. We were one of the OGs pre-COVID. I was actually homeschooled back in the day, swore I would never do it, and here we are. And I have loved being able to homeschool my kids. Ironically, what I have always said will get me out of California when people ask me why I don't quit California. I have said my line in the sand is when they come after homeschooling families so much so that we can no longer homeschool in California, I'm out. I will not sacrifice my kids' well-being in terms of their education for a state that's pretty. So obviously, the horizon line is not very friendly toward homeschool families in California, but there was kind of this pause put on the full frontal attack that has been for a long time going on in California against homeschooling families, kind of around COVID era. There was like this lull in the attack. Well, now we're seeing the lull start to go away and the attack come back. So Assembly Bill 84 is going to be heard in the Assembly Education Committee on April 30th. Mark your calendars. You need to know that. And we won't know for sure what time until the agenda is released, but I'm going to walk you through everything about this bill that is so egregious and the reason why it's important to bring it to your attention. The reason why I even know about this bill is not because I'm super savvy and can pay attention to every piece of legislation that goes through the California Legislature. There are not enough hours in the day nor enough assistance to be able to do that. The reason why I know about this bill is because I woke up to an email from my charter that I am tied into. And this is what it basically said. I'm going to give you some key outlines. It said that they were writing to inform us about a proposed state legislation of Assembly Bill 84 that will have an impact on our school. Now, important to recognize that charter schools offer various versions of learning. So for families like me, my kids don't go to a campus to learn. And there are a lot of families who are in the same boat for many different reasons, which I will cover in this podcast. But it's important to know that just because kids don't go on campus for learning does not mean that they are somehow missing out and not getting high quality education. In fact, I would argue that many of the families who choose to withhold their kids from on-campus learning are actually recovering an incredible education for their kids. So this email that came through said, one of the main provisions of AB 84 is that it will reduce funding for students who attend public charter schools and who do not receive full-time in-person instruction. This means that if this bill is passed into law, students enrolled in flex-based, personalized learning public charter schools will be allocated less state funding because they do not receive in-person instruction at least 4 out of 5 days a week. This bill will also increase operational costs for our school, which would result in further reductions in student services and support. Obviously, they went on to say how this specific charter school offers a unique and flexible and personalized educational model because they strongly believe, and research has corroborated, that every child learns differently. So many of our students thrive in a more flexible setting, including students who may not have found success in conventional classroom environments, which is completely true. So I received this email, and of course, I am a researcher, so I started going down the rabbit hole on what is AB 84. So that's what I'm going to share with you guys. In the big picture of what AB 84 is, this is what, if passed, AB 84 would do, and I'm going to get more into it. Again, pay attention through the end because I'm going to cover a lot of ground, including a call to action for you on how you can push back, and then that other nasty little bill I mentioned at the beginning, I'll cover at the very end. Okay. AB 84 will cut funding by up to 30% for non-classroom based schools. It will ban schools from partnering with families to create customized learning plans. It will force schools to follow district rules without giving them district resources. It will add costly bureaucracy that takes funding away from students. It will give local districts more power to block charter growth, even for schools with wait lists. Essentially, none of this is about fixing education. This is about strangling families who have pursued alternative education models that is different from the standardized conveyor belt education system in California that is broke. That's what this is all about. It's about forcing regulations and strangling growths of charters and passing those on to families who will have no other alternative other than to put their kids back in the broken public school system. So why is this important? This is where I'm going to go through some details. Senate Bill 277 and Senate Bill 276 passed within the last decade plus. So right around the last 10 years. SB 277 was passed by the California Legislature in June 2015. It was signed into law by Governor Jerry Brown on June 30th, 2015 in California. Okay. This SB 277 was a public health law, and it eliminated personal belief exemptions, including religious exemptions, for vaccination requirements for kids entering public or private schools and daycare centers in California. So you may have heard about this bill. This bill kind of started it all in California, and obviously there was a lot of going on in the background. But this was the bill that kind of thrust us into this fight as parents for the medical rights of our kids. So when 277 passed in 2015, it eliminated us being able to go to the doctor and say we don't believe in vaccines and we don't want them, or because of our deeply held religious conviction, we don't want to pursue the vaccination schedule for our kids. It said, well, if that's what you think, that's great, but now your kid will not be allowed to attend a public, private, or daycare center. So public school, private school, or daycare center in California. That passed in and was signed into law in 2015, which would be exactly a decade ago. Then came SB 276. So here's what happened to a lot of families. A lot of families during that time were like, oh my gosh, what do we do? Well, there are still medical exemptions available. And because I have a child who is fragile or has a sibling who was injured by vaccines, or a parent or a family member, or they themselves were injured by a first round, I will go acquire a medical exemption. Okay, then comes September 2019. The California Legislature passed SB 276, and it was signed into law by our wonderful Governor Gavin Newsom on September 9th, 2019. This was a follow-up to SB 277. So what this did was it said it was addressing fraudulent medical exemptions. What it really did is it revoked medical exemptions basically across the board from any family pursuing a medical exemption for their child. And on top of that, it grandfathered pre-2020 exemptions until the child's next grade span. So once the child reached the next grade span, that medical exemption was gone. Really what it did was it made it virtually, hear me carefully, virtually impossible for families in California to acquire a legitimate medical exemption for their child. And there's a lot to SB 276, but essentially with SB 276 passing in September of 2019, along with SB 277 that had passed a few years before that, families in California had no recourse any longer when it came to the vaccine schedule and the school system for their kids. So essentially what this created was an exodus from the school system for families who could not, for whatever reason, whether it was a personal belief, a religious belief, or a valid medical reason, could not do vaccines for their kids. It kicked them out of public schools, private schools, in-person charter schools, and daycares in California across the board. So with that, a lot of families left California. I remember seeing a ton of families leave over this. But as this narrowed the opportunities for these families in California, it gave birth to this rise of the charter school program because it was seen as one of the only alternatives to the system. So these programs, the charter programs, were seen as a hallelujah for families in California who really had nowhere else to go and who had been told your child can no longer attend any in-person learning. Okay, here's from a parent that I found this comment online when I was researching all this. A parent said, California pushed unvaccinated children out of public schools with SB 277. Then came SB 276. It was a sweeping crackdown that vilified doctors, revoked legitimate medical exemptions, and labeled concerned parents as threats. Now with AB 84, so this is the new bill that's going to be heard in the committee at the end of this month. The state of California is targeting homeschool charter students by threatening to cut off access to instructional funds and vital educational resources. This is not an isolated issue. It's part of a disturbing pattern of government overreach that continues to erode parental rights and educational freedom. If we don't push back now, we risk losing the ability to make choices for our children's education altogether. I think parents should reach out to their local representatives and speak up. That's kind of where we are at. And I wanted you to know that background so you know why this is so important, because essentially what this is doing is it's telling families who had no other alternative in California, who wanted to still somehow be tied into a charter. Charters, if you are meeting off campus and you are completely home-based, many charters offer incentives in terms of being able to recover some of the taxes that you put into the system, which can only be used for educational purposes. So I'll go through, you're going to learn a lot here. I'm going to go through what your taxes look like in terms of what you pay for education in California. And it's important to know that for these families who were kicked out due to SB 276 and SB 277, this was an opportunity to recover some of the tax money that we pay in. We were told you're not allowed to use the system that you're paying into. You are fully discriminated against. Sorry, keep paying into the broken system. Okay. So now with 84, it will come after those families even more aggressively and say, now because you've been pushed out of the system and you are not meeting on any form of campus for your in-person learning, now we're going to cut your funding even more. Do you get this? Do you see what's happening? It is a continuing death by 1,000 cuts in California for families who seek alternative methods of education for many different reasons for their families. Okay, let's talk through the current regulations on charters in California so you can get a framework for the reality that charters already are hyper-regulated. So this excuse that there needs to be additional regulations put on charters via this new bill is absolutely insane. AB 84 is not necessary. If anything, it is a Trojan horse to further punish families in California who seek alternate education. Some of the regulations on charters in California based on the latest available information. There is an authorization process that's put on charters where they have to be approved by local school districts. I couldn't just tomorrow decide I'm going to create a charter school. It has to go through a whole system of checks by the State Board of Education. And an assembly bill in 2019 tightened this process, allowing districts to deny petitions based on fiscal impact, community interest, or duplication of existing programs. It started this process of already tightening up on on charters, and this was in 2019. Charters must comply with health, safety, civil rights, and statewide assessment laws, which is testing. So for a family like mine, even though we don't meet on campus, my kids still have to do all those dumb testing requirements that are put forward by the state. So they're still testing to make sure that my kids are on track. So that's another regulation. It's not like you just sign up with a charter and then you're off to whatever flowers and rainbows and unicorn and glitter you want to go to, and you're never there's no checkpoint. No, there are plenty of checkpoints to make sure that you are actually ensuring that your child is well educated, better educated than the dumb system. There's a non-sectarian mandate, which is another education code that says charters must be non-sectarian in programs, admissions, and operations, which basically means that they can't be religious. So you can't sign up with a charter and then it's like, surprise, we're a private school and we're going to teach your kid about Jesus. You can't do that. As of July 2020, teacher credentialing, all teachers have to be and must hold credentials. Okay, this is done through a massive oversight program. Renewals are every 5 years and are tied to performance categories that are set out from the California School Dashboard. Low performing charter schools will face stricter scrutiny, and authorizers can deny renewals for fiscal or governance issues. There was also a moratorium on non-classroom based schools that was put forward. This was all, again, in 2020, which extended through January 2026. New virtual or independent study charters unless tied to specific court rulings. Existing schools can continue, but they face funding caps or audits. So already it was starting to, like I said, strangle. I want you to picture this. It was this strangling of not only charter schools, but opportunities for families in California who want something better and something different. Okay, that's 2020. Let's talk about the funding and oversight for charters. So charters receive a per pupil funding via the local control funding formula. And that either comes directly from the state or through their authorizer, which would be local funding. Proposition 98 guarantees a baseline for 2025 to 2026, which was proposed at about $18,900 per pupil and could be supplemented to $24,000 per pupil. Now, it's important to know that we parents don't get that money. So, I mean, that sounds like a lot, but a lot of it goes back to the actual charter school. So if we are tied into a charter school, which will then allocate funding for our kids to use on, it has to be educational materials or classes or tutoring, we don't get that much money. I've heard it's around $3,000 to $6,000 per student. $6,000 would be very high if you're lucky enough to get into a charter that offers that. Let's go into the enforcement and trends. So state oversight. The California Department of Education tracks charter data via the Charter School Certification of Information, which is updated yearly. As of May 2024, 1,283 charters operate, serving 11.7% of public school students. So if you're tied into a charter program, you are considered a public school. Your kids would be considered public school students. So in short, with all of this, I want you to see that California charters are already hyper-regulated and the regulations have continued to build. I have been watching this for a decade now, and I can tell you I have seen a very rapid growth in regulations on charter schools in California. There was a slight lull in that COVID era, and we knew it was coming back, and here we are. It's coming back very hard. Okay, that brings me to diving fully into Assembly Bill 84, which is what you need to know about. This is billed as increasing oversight and accountability for charter schools in California because we need more, guys, because we need more. It's a lie from hell. It's not because of that. And I'm going to go into what this actually is about. But just suffice to say that this is a wide-ranging, it's massively draconian, it's 114 pages of a proposal that will strangle charter schools and families in California if this passes. Assembly Bill 84, which again is going to be heard April 30th, builds on prior efforts to regulate charter schools, such as AB 1505 in 2019, which gave districts more authority to deny charter petitions, and the moratorium that I told you about on new non-classroom based charters, which extends in some forms through 2025. They say that this is about seeking to enhance transparency, financial accountability, and data integration within California's public education system, with a particular focus on charter schools. Here are some of the components of this bill. And I know I told you in the beginning, just kind of like broad umbrella. Here are some more of the nitty-gritty components of AB 84. It will create the Office of the Education Inspector General. So it will establish a brand new office with more oversight within the California Department of Education, led by a brand new shiny person known as the Education Inspector General, who will be appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. And this office would oversee audits, investigations, county offices of education, and charter schools. Okay, so it's more oversight, less independence and local control, more state grabbing at local charter schools. It will enhance financial and performance audits by emphasizing high quality audits to address concerns about mismanagement or fraud, particularly in non-classroom based charter schools. It's just like having the IRS hang around on your back, breathing down your neck, every decision you make, every financial penny you spend. That's what this is. It's oversight on charters, looking for a charter school to screw up one time so they can shut it down. That's what this really is. It will require authorities to verify average daily attendance data for non-classroom based charter schools. So now it's going to be making sure how they're going to run that. I don't even know. I think probably families would have to check in every single day to say that they are logging their kid into school and then probably logging their kid out of school. It's going to be that kind of crazy regulations. As right now, what we do is we say, my child was actively involved in education Monday through Friday for the full amount of hours that are necessary, and you sign it. You're signing it in blood saying, yep, your kid is good to go for the month. Now there's even more verification for daily attendance. It also will establish the Charter Authorizing Support Team, administered by the County Office Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistance Team. All these fancy flipping titles on our taxpayer dime. It will standardize authorizing practices and provide support to chartering entities. Okay, so this is just another board to oversee charter schools because there's not enough, guys. We need more oversight and more regulations. Then comes the data system integration. All of this is AB 84. This will aim to quote unquote improve tracking of student attendance and funding allocation. Again, it's more a big brother watching you and your child and making sure that every T is crossed and every I is dotted, on top of the regulations that are already in place for charters. So what are the implications for charter schools and for families who utilize charter school education for their kids? Increased regulation, heightened scrutiny and standardized requirements. It will absolutely limit operational flexibility, which is a hallmark of charter schools. It's an additional financial burden because all of these offices and these shiny people in government that would be created get paid. They get paid. So it's more of a financial burden and a responsibility for charters now to have to pay into, which means less money going to the students and more money going into the bureaucracy and the machine. More focus on non-classroom based charters. So for all those families that I explained in the beginning who cannot go in person into classrooms, it's more focus on them. It's more focus on those kids, those families who have been discriminated against so profoundly in California. It's more looking into them and more oversight into those families. And that's not because the government is benevolent. It's because the government does not want those families in California. They do not want those families to survive in California. These schools, which rely heavily on independent study or online learning, will be singled out for tighter ADA verification and oversight, okay? Local control will potentially be reduced and handed up to the state for more centralized control. And we know centralized regulation, centralized control is not a positive. Assembly Bill 84 will cut funding from charter public schools by more than allegedly $210 million and will divert those critical charter school dollars away from teaching and learning into more of the bureaucracy and admin, like I just explained. AB 84 also contains measures that will make it harder to open more of these charter schools, create more bureaucracy for charter public school contracts. It will apply more restrictions on credentialing for staff who serve charter public school students. It will cut non-classroom-based charter funding by up to 30% and increase administrative costs for charter public schools. Can you see what I am painting for you? This is intentionally to destroy non-classroom-based charter programs in California. There's no other way to see it but that. That's what this is 100%. So let's talk about how much we pay into the California education system, because that's really important. So in 2023 to 24, California's K through 12 public schools were funded with roughly $131 billion, according to the Public Policy Institute of California, which breaks down to about $22,893 per pupil, based on approximately 5.7 million students enrolled in 23 to 24. Those monies, those dollars, come from state funds, which is around 60%, primarily from income taxes and sales taxes, local funds, which is about 33%, mostly property taxes, and federal funds, which is about 6 to 9% in non-pandemic years. And then when COVID came around, it increased to about 11%. So that's where the money comes from that goes into the public education system in California. So I wanted to break that down so you could see what that looks like for you personally. So if you own a $500,000 home and you earn $50,000, this is what it looks like. It looks like you paying property tax of about $5,000 times 33%, which is equivalent to $1,650. Okay, that's your first hit. Then your income tax, $1,000. Then your sales tax, about $175. So that totals about $2,827 annually that you are paying into the system. That's only for this, that's only state. Okay. We're not even talking federal. So you are paying, let's call it $3,000 that you're paying annually into the busted school system in California. Now, for families who were kicked out of the school system because of SB 276 and 277, we are still paying that money to the state, but we are told you don't get to use the school system. So keep paying into the system, but your kid's not allowed. Now they're saying, keep paying into the system, your kid is not allowed. And because your kid is not allowed under AB 84, we are going to hurt you even worse by putting in all these new regulations and taking away even more of the funding that is already hyper-siphoned to your kid, funneled to being just little drips based on what you pay into the system. Now we're going to take even more and we're going to make you hurt. That's what Assembly Bill 84 is. So I think the good question to ask at this point is, what is the motivation for all of this? Why is California doing this? What's behind it? Obviously, they hate charters. The teachers' unions are super powerful in California. So you start kind of picturing, the picture comes into focus. And here's what the reality is. California's K through 12 enrollment has dropped from 6.2 million in 2013 to 14 to 5.7 million in 2023 to 24. That's a huge, huge hit. And there are projections of further declines through 2030. Now, that's not even accounting for all the families who are still in the public system, but are with a charter. So they're taking their kids home. So we're seeing a huge exodus from the school system, and it's happening very quickly. And I think COVID was a reality check for a lot of parents who got to see for the first time what's really going on in the school systems, and they started pulling their kids out, and they were like, this is insane, this woke garbage, this like the weird teaching. So families said, we're going to pull the kids out. On top of that, there's a pandemic aid cliff. So all the federal relief that propped up budgets and staffing, well, that expired in fall 2024. So we now have a fiscal cliff in California. A Reason Foundation study estimated that California spent $4 billion in 2022 through 23 on students no longer in districts due to attendance-based funding and hold harmless policies. So we are at a point where California needed all this. They wanted this money. They were greedy. They spent their money, and now the money's not going to continue on. So they need to figure out ways to get that money in alternate methods. That's a huge reason why Assembly Bill 84 is being put forward. The popularities of these non-classroom-based schools have grown massively. They've risen 12% from 2019 to 20 and 2022 to 23, driven by families seeking choice without financial strain. And the result is that, to be perfectly honest, students are thriving in these non-classroom based models of education. The standardized test scores that we are seeing come out of homeschooling families, of families who are tied into the charter schools but do 100% from home or like a hybrid from home, we are seeing that consistently and nationally, these homeschoolers score much higher than their peers. We've seen that homeschoolers score 15 to 30 percentile points higher on standardized tests like the SAT and ACT and the CAASPP. Homeschoolers consistently show that they are more college ready than their peers when they do the ACT testing and looking at college graduate levels. Homeschoolers lead in reading and math growth, with being 10 to 20 points higher due to customization and parental oversight. And again, this is because they're not lost in a crowd of 25 kids in a public system that's teaching to the lowest denominator. Homeschoolers generally outperform. So what is next? Here are 5 things that you need to know about what is next for AB 84. The legislature specifically intended for charter schools to operate independently. What we are seeing now is a full frontal attack that has leveled up because we are post-COVID now. The state needs more money and the state doesn't want kids leaving the stupid, broken system. So they are going to start to pass as much as they can to get butts back in seats so that they get more money, so that the teachers' unions are happier, which I didn't even mention. But I looked up the guy who wrote this Assembly Bill 84. Here we go. Okay. Al Muratsuchi, whatever his last name is. In his top donors of 2024, education ranks up at the top. So he's heavily funded by the teachers' unions. He owes allegiance to the teachers' unions. It should not surprise us that he's putting forward an assembly bill that's going to hurt families who are pursuing education outside of the stupid, broken system. So are there good teachers in the system? I always get flack for this. Yes, there are good teachers in the system. I'm talking about the system as a whole being busted and families being forced to pay into the system. Every single day when we go to work and we pay taxes, we are paying into a system, and then many families are discriminated against being able to use that system. And now with this assembly bill, will be even further discriminated against. All of this information is going to be dropped below in the comment show notes, so you can go and find all of this. Here are the 5 things that you need to do right now. Go to the Assembly Education Committee homepage, and you're going to submit a position letter. You are going to oppose Assembly Bill 84. Then you're going to submit a comment opposing AB 84 through the state portal. That's below. Then you're going to go to the bill page and you're going to oppose under the comment type. Then you're going to find your California State Assembly member and senator, and you are going to let them know that you oppose AB 84. And after that, there are 2 forms to send your opposition in just 2 minutes. All of this should take you under 10 minutes to do. Then once you've completed this, you're going to share this video and let people know that they need to read the show notes so that they can get engaged too. That's what your call to action is. This is an incredibly important bill, and it's not one that we sleep on. There's a lot coming up with this, obviously, with the hearing happening. And so now is the time to get hyper vigilant and super engaged so that this does not pass. It would be a huge, huge blow to homeschooling families in California. Okay, I told you that I was going to tell you about one more bad bill, so I'm just going to go over this really fast. AB 727. This bill would mandate that every student in grades 7 through 12 has the Trevor Project's phone number and text line printed on their school IDs, because California is psychotic and just they just won't quit. So the Trevor Project offers counseling for individuals ages 13 to 24. It creates an online community where LGBTQ youth can connect, share experiences, ask tough questions, and find support. They even offer resources for dealing with the tension that can arise when LGBTQ plus identities clash with family beliefs, especially in religious households. This bill would basically say, yep, that's super important for every single student in California, grades 7 to 12, to have immediate access to, unfettered from just having to ask someone or their parents for that number. So the bill will use public and private schools as a platform to promote this specific agenda. Obviously, it probably does not align with the vast majority of the values of families that are homeschooling in California, but they don't care. They still want to get to your kids anyhow. So many of the faith-based schools who have deeply held beliefs about marriage, gender, and sexuality that may conflict with the Trevor Project's views, probably do conflict with the Trevor Project's views. It doesn't matter. They would be required to comply with this mandate and could force them to promote views that contradict their religious teachings, which would violate their First Amendment rights. So this is going to be heard in the Assembly Education Committee on Wednesday, April 9th. There is a link below. It's one link on this one for you to say, I oppose this dumb bill AB 727 too, because California, you're really missing it when it comes to making education great. Instead, you are strangling those who are actually progressives in education and are seeking something better, and you are impeding our First Amendment rights. Cue the sound that this is the typical in California. But you do need to know about these, because if you don't know and these pass, then California just becomes much harder for families like mine, and probably families like yours too. All the information you need to know outside of just listening to me talk your ear off about all of this is in the show notes with easy links for you to be able to right now get involved. Don't say I'll do this later. Just sit down for 7 minutes. You can get it done in 7 minutes and click through those links. Oppose. That's all you need to know. You're just opposing the heck out of AB 84 and AB 727. And then keep your eyes on them. Share this. Please subscribe to the Britt Mayer Show. We put out really important information, and this is more of an urgent release for you, but we do put out amazing podcasts where we bring on guests who help you think clearly and rationally and with better perspective. And those are really fun too. So please subscribe to the Britt Mayer Show across all platforms, share this video, and get busy in the show notes below. And we will see you later.